Hello, everyone. Progress in autism does not begin with language. Today, I am going to answer this question because as the father of an autistic boy, so to quickly recap my background, my journey. I am the father of Alexandre, who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3, who is now 9 years old, and who from the start was diagnosed as having a rather pronounced language delay. Alexandre speaks, but speaks at a truly beginner level. So that means that for a number of years now, he has been stuck at a relatively emerging level of language. As the father of an autistic child, and I suppose that in your case as well, one of the main cognitive functions that is affected when you are the parent of an autistic child, it is indeed language. And I suppose that, like me, the area in which you would most like to see the greatest progress, of course, is language, because it is language that allows us to communicate, to understand each other, to interact, to function normally in daily life, for your child to go to school, to listen to lessons, to take exams, and so on. And this disability in the child is a major handicap. And indeed, as parents of autistic children, we all want to solve this problem first. From a functional point of view, what you need to know, and this is something I also came to understand through my experience with my son, is that there is, let's say, a hierarchy of cognitive functions. And as long as indeed your child is not regulated, as long as attention has not emerged, as long as the child is still socially withdrawn, he does not have the functional fundamentals, the necessary basics to be able to speak. Thank you. Language is an extremely complex function in the brain. I won't go into technical details at the neurological or neurofunctional level, but it is a function that is extremely demanding in terms of resources for the brain. And in the logical order of things, when a neurotypical child develops, it is one of the last functions to emerge before generalization, before theory of mind, because it is a function that is extremely demanding in terms of electrophysiological resources, if I may say so. So in Alexandre's case, today, it's been 3 months since I started intensive neuromodulation. So far, to be honest, the impact I have had on language is extremely limited. On the other hand, when reading the scientific literature, what we observe is that there are a certain number of stages in the, let's say, reversibility or at least partial normalization before reaching the stage of language. Notably tension, concentration, stereotypies, and self-stimulation, which in my case have almost completely disappeared. With the implementation of neuromodulation, hypersensitivity also completely disappeared. That was the first parameter to disappear when I started intensive neuromodulation. Indeed, according to the literature, language is one of the last functions in the pyramid of different cognitive functions. I don't know if it will emerge, but at the very least, I really hope so. Referring to the literature, I dare to hope that the function will emerge in a fairly significant way. I hope so. We tend to rush to want immediate language in order to function. With his son, who is completely, his son or his child, his daughter, his son, it doesn't matter, but to be able to function normally on a daily basis, which is completely understandable. And I suppose that's what you want as well. But know one thing, as long as you haven't normalized your child in terms of regulation, in terms of self-stimulation, stereotypy, and hypersensitivity, all these autistic symptoms, in fact, which are blocking for the brain, goodbye. Language will not emerge or will not function properly. You will always have a noticeable dysfunction at that level. First, we lay the foundation, the basics at the brain level, and then the brain indeed needs normalization at that level. From a technical neurofunctional point of view, we talk about synchronization, we talk about activation of areas, activation, especially gamma, to actually allow the brain to have the necessary resources to function so that the different areas can work together. We also talk about connectivity between the key areas of the brain, and all of that is involved. So you have the structural functioning of the brain, but you also have the electrophysiological functioning. And as you've understood well on this channel, on the YouTube channel, I focus on the functional aspect, which concerns a great many autistic children who, in my opinion, are wrongly diagnosed as autistic because they may have a neurofunctional block, an electrophysiological lock, But since clinically they show autistic symptoms by reflex and wrongly, they are classified as autistic. That being said, when you improve the electrophysiological functioning, especially the connectivity between certain areas, the electrophysiological synchronization between different regions of the brain, you will enable certain key areas such as Broca's area and Wernicke's area, which are truly crucial for the emergence of language, to have sufficient connectivity and allow language to emerge properly. If now you have a deficiency at this level, the brain will first establish the fundamentals, regulation, self-stimulation, etc. I'm repeating myself a little, but it's important to say this. At least this is truly the process I observed in my son and that I am sharing with you today. And I know this based on the scientific literature, and I encourage you to look into it. I cite a number of sources adapted from various references, especially in neuromodulation, where indeed the question of the order in which different brain functions emerge is precise and universal. As long as the fundamentals have not been established at the functional level of the brain, language will not emerge. So don't try to achieve this function too quickly. Focus first on the fundamentals, on the desire to communicate, on the right material and emotional conditions you provide for your child. Of course, ideally, your child should be immersed in language, constantly stimulated by their environment. Ideally, your child should have an educator. That's what I put in place alongside neuromodulation, which seems absolutely fundamental to me from a synergistic perspective. Make sure, indeed, to first work on the issue of stereotypies and hypersensitivity, which are typical manifestations of neurofunctional dysfunction. Once you have addressed these issues, indeed, language will have every chance to emerge, once again referring to scientific sources, which are now relatively easy to access. I wish you good luck and hope for the greatest possible improvement for your autistic child.